Horia was extremely embarrassed when she heard No's insults. She was angry, but she didn't dare to speak out. She still hopes to have a family and everything will be happy, so she wants to take a step back and hope that Noah can accept her as soon as possible. Noah hated Horia. But he hates Horia, not abalone. So while eating abalone, he said coldly, "A woman like you who is not obedient to men will stay in this house in the future, and she must be a good servant." Horia had no choice but to eat her own noodles without talking. In fact, Horia at this time didn't know that her husband had already been infected with a venereal disease. If she knew, she would definitely not make such an abalone dinner for her husband. She knew that Noah likes abalone the most, so she made such an abalone banquet to please him, but she was scolded bloody by him. Noah turned his grief and anger into appetite and ate a dozen large abalones by himself. Because he was upset, he even finished a small bottle of wine and drank it. The previous owner of this house left a lot of good wine in the cellar in the basement downstairs. There are red wine, white wine, and champagne. When the Wu family bought a house, they wanted a package price, so they left all these wines. Noah took out a bottle of Motai from the wine cellar and pulled Harold. The two of them drank more than a kilogram in total. After eating and drinking, Noah returned to his bedroom, planning to take a nap. However, when he lay down, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. What's wrong? His place is really itchy. Seafood is a hair item, and liquor is also a very powerful hair item. Together, these two things are a perfect match. Noah was itchy at first, but he couldn't stop it. He grabbed desperately, and even the grabbing was a bit broken and bleeding, but still nothing got better. The bone-erupting itching had already made him unbearable. He hurriedly turned over from the bed and went to see Mrs. Wilson in a hurry. When he saw Mrs. Wilson, he was a little impatient and said, "Mom, give me some money. I have to go to the hospital now." Old Mrs. Wilson frowned and asked, "What's wrong with you? Why are you going to the hospital? Don't you know it costs money to go to the hospital?" After experiencing all kinds of disasters before, the current old Mrs. Wilson regards money more than anything else. Noah said with an expression of pain, I feel very uncomfortable, so I have to go to the hospital to have a look." The old Mrs. Wilson asked him, "How do you go back to tell me in advance?" Noah said in embarrassment, "Well, it's not easy to speak up. Mom, just give me some money and let me go to the hospital for a look." Old Mrs. Wilson exclaimed, "Could you be sick from that aspect?" Noah didn't expect that his mother would be able to guess it all at once, and said embarrassedly, "I can't be sure now, so I want to go to the hospital." The old Mrs. Wilson looked terrified, and blurted out, "Did you and Horia that slut a few days ago?" "This." Noah hesitated for a moment, and then gently nodded. "When I was in Wu's house, that happened between me and her that day." No's voice became smaller and smaller, but the Lady Wilson still understood. Upon hearing this, the Lady Wilson said nervously, "Oh. That Horia was in the black coal kiln. Who knows what wild man she was with. I think she is not only pregnant with someone else's wild species, but also came back with all kinds of diseases. Come. I'll accompany you to the hospital for a thorough investigation." When Noah heard this, he also guessed that he was probably infected by Horia from the disease, and he became even more annoyed. But the irritation turned to more irritation. Now for him, the top priority is to go to the hospital to check if he's sick. So he hurriedly said, "Oh, Mom, how embarrassed to let you accompany me with this kind of thing, and I can do it myself if you give me the money." Old Mrs. Wilson said earnestly, "No, if I don't go, I will always feel uneasy. Don't say anything, I will go with you, and go now." After that, the Lady Wilson got up immediately, ready to go out. Noah had no choice but to nod his head and left home with his mother helplessly. Just when Noah and Mrs. Wilson went to the hospital, the Wu family's only remaining subordinate in Chongbai Mountain finally found an opportunity and got into the morgue of the local hospital. He spent a lot of money to bribe the gatekeeper of the morgue, and the other party made an exception to let him in. He called on the 8 people who died in the avalanche of Chongbai Mountain, and said to him, "You can see it. but you must be psychologically prepared. The death of these 8 people is very miserable. The Wu family's men nodded, and opened the 8 freezers for corpses one by one. When the body bag was opened, the Wu family's subordinate was shocked and stunned. Although the death of the 8 great heavenly kings was indeed miserable, he could still recognize that these 8 corpses were the 8 great heavenly kings. So he took out his mobile phone, took a photo of the 8th heavenly king's body, and sent it to Regnar. At this time, Regnar was waiting for news in Suzhou. Although the Wu family has determined and affirmed the fact that the 8 heavenly kings have been killed in their hearts, everyone still has the last gleam of hope. But when these photos were posted, all the hopes of the Wu family collapsed completely. The 8 heavenly kings are really dead. And died of an avalanche. This is too unacceptable.